podcast joint with Ciara.
What the deal? This is T Money, and you are now watching the T Money podcast joint with Ciara Ross. But Ciara is not here today. Unfortunately, we have somebody sitting in for Ciara today.
We do.
A very, very good friend of mine. Her name is Ciara, the Purple Goddess from VPR Radio. What's up, Ciara?
Hey,
how you doing?
Here. I'm fantastic.
Salute to you, man, and I thank you so much for being here today. Let me tell you guys something. Let me tell the audience a little something about Ciara. And peace out to my man DJ FMI too, who was also part of her show. I never, and you would never think this in regards to me because of my history of doing television and hosting things and X, Y, and Z. I never thought to do anything as it relates to doing a podcast or of any type. And they were, VPR Radio was so gracious to have me on. They interviewed me several times. I don't know how many times. More than 5 or 6 times,
yes.
right? Mm-hmm. So that inspired me to go on a run. You know, I did a run at a certain point of like 25, 30 different podcasts.
Back to back.
Right, you know, and everybody interviewed me, and it inspired me to do this show today. So the T Money podcast joint, it was an inspiration based on my origins of being part of your show, and I thank you very much for your graciousness, and I thank you for you guys showing me
legendary.
the love. But with that being said, today we have, speaking of special, we have the American Dream sitting right next to me, my man Bruce Jackson from Microsoft.
Yes, sir. Many claps. Clap, clap, clap.
I mean, if I'm the only one clapping here, everybody in this room should be clapping for this brother right here.
We need a standing ovation for this man.
Because let me tell you something. His rise to success is uncommon, and it should be heralded and celebrated. But Bruce, how are you today, my brother? How's everything?
I'm great. It's a pleasure and honor to be here with you and your new co-host. Right?
No question. Kiana's definitely special. So I preface my whole scenario here with saying that you are the American dream. I mean, your rise from humble beginnings, right, to being the lead counsel at Microsoft and doing great things in the community. We're here to discuss that today, and also to discuss, more importantly, your book, Never Far From Home, which came out. When did it come out?
Last year,
right? Yeah, February, right? And talk about its progress and how it has changed your life, and So, talk to me a little about your beginnings and where you're from, and what made you think to become an attorney in the first place,
right.
And how, because a lot of us want to do these things in life, especially people of color, but some of us don't have the opportunity to do these things. So speak to me in regards to how that transformed and how how it manifested and.
Right, T Money. I grew up not in Long Island, but in.
Okay. To my audience, this is a running joke so he's talking about Long Island. I'm gonna talk to all my Long Island people. Listen to me. He's trying to play me because I'm from Long Island, but I'm from LI, Strong Island, period, point blank, Public Enemy. I can go on for days, but he's from the city, so we were having this little back and forth, so you won't miss the joke. So whenever you said that, just remember that this is where it's coming from. Thank you very much.
Well, I grew up in Brooklyn, New York.
BK, respect to BK.
And pre-gentrified Crown Heights.
Crown
Heights that we know.
No question.
Right. So at that point, you can imagine it was just predominantly black community.
Right.
I lived there with my mother and 5 siblings. My father was absent, single-parent household.
Right.
And we were on public assistance. That's kind of what the life is like for someone growing up in the inner city.
That's right.
And it's really not designed for us to get out, right?
Right.
It's
of
just
course
not.
Not.
People
of
don't
course
like
not.
to have that
Right.
discussion. The reality is that we are just as smart as anyone else, but we don't have the resources or the environment.
Right.
And I constantly tell people, if you take someone out of an affluent area, wherever you live, and you actually put them in a put them in a ghetto, they'll struggle.
That's
right. If you
Right.
take someone out of the urban area and put them in the affluent area, they'll do well. So society has continued to fail us.
Yes.
One, right? And I think that's a problem.
Right.
So, listen, I wrote the book because some of my entertainment clients encouraged me to write it. They said, Bruce, most people in our community want to be entertainers or athletes.
Right.
And you took a different route. So it's important for the young people in our community to see their other options. In fact, you have a greater percentage of being a doctor or a lawyer than an entertainer or an athlete.
And what's so interesting is a lot of us don't even look at it that way. We think that the only way out of our situation is to be a great athlete, to be, unfortunately, to sell drugs, to pimp, to do things that are going to generate immediate income,
Right, fast
and
money.
big money or fast money, right? So they don't think, because they don't have the means, to your point, right?
They don't even have the means, but what we have done is people who have made it through, we fail to go back.
Right.
We're
Talk
taught
about it.
once you make it, don't go back.
Right.
And so the young kids, they can only see and be what they see.
That's
Right.
right.
Right. So I think it's incumbent upon people like me and others who have cracked through
Right.
to go back and show kids there are other options. Because if you don't see it, you can't be it.
Of course
Right?
not.
So they
you can't
want to be what
visualize
they
it.
see.
Right.
Right.
To your point, you can't visualize it unless
absolutely.
you see it. Yeah, no question. So where'd you go to college? I know you went to school. Where'd you go to school, and how did you, with the conversation about not having the means? How did you even get into school? How did it even work? Like, because a lot of people, I want to be a lawyer. Okay, so how does that work? Well, you need hundreds of thousands of dollars to be a lawyer because you have to go to law school, you got to take the bar, you got to take your LSAT, you got to, and most people can't even. It's very hard for them to even get groceries. Okay, let's be honest with you. So, like, how did you escalate yourself from being where you were to actually attending a prestigious school and and flourishing in that environment?
Well, let me just bring you back a little bit.
Okay, that's fine.
So, because if you think about living in the inner city,
Right.
you're always looking for ways to make money.
Right.
And when I wrote the book, a lot of people, because I've been doing national tours around
Right.
judges, and they're like, why would you say you committed some of these crimes?
Right.
I said, because that's life like in the inner city.
Right.
And if I'm really going to inspire the young people, they have to see me as them.
Yeah.
Of course,
Right? So,
right.
and that's just the reality of living there. So I'm not trying to impress the world on Bruce Jackson.
Right.
The book is written really to inspire people.
And I'm sure you
Right.
passed the statute of limitations for all of
Right,
this.
right. There's
question.
no question about it at this point. Well past it.
Right.
But I think what I did early on, I participated in the co-op program, which is a high school program where you
Right.
work 1 week, go to school 1 week.
Right.
And that kept me off the streets, to be honest, because it gave me a legitimate stream of income.
Right.
But the reality is it didn't prepare me academically for
Right.
college. So
Right.
the only way I got into college is one of the programs they had, which is Higher Education Opportunity Program for students who are academically and financially disadvantaged.
Oh, okay.
Right.
That's how I got in.
Oh, okay.
And in fact, after 2 weeks, I had to complete a summer program to really be fully admitted to Hofstra. After 2 weeks, I realized I wasn't prepared, so I called my mother and I said, Mom, I'm leaving.
Right.
She tried to convince me to stay, but I said, I can't do it. This is too hard. But then I had to call my aunt, who we call Big Bertha.
Oh, well, everybody has one, right?
Everyone has one of those.
No
She said,
question.
I already heard that you're coming. Want to come home, but what do you want to do, Bruce? You want to go back to the projects? At that point, my mind was made up. I said, maybe. She
Right.
said, do you want to go back and work and Chase Manhattan Bank, which
Oh,
is
I
where
saw
was
that in the
working,
book.
Right.
in the basement. And I said, maybe. So she realized she couldn't convince me at that point to stay. So she said, you're not coming.
Right.
She said, you know why? Because your mother, your grandmother, and I, my aunt, she said, we picked cotton in South Carolina. We couldn't look white
Right.
people in the face.
Right.
And she said, no one in our family ever graduated. And she hung up.
Right.
So
It's
at
on
that
you.
point, it was on me, right?
Right.
I was more fearful of coming home to deal with her than a challenge of trying
Right.
to get through Hofstra.
Right.
And so I just used that, right, determination to kind of push my way through.
I was speaking to my dad a couple of weeks ago. I think we were watching some movie on television, and you always want to get some sort of perspective as to how your parents lived through segregation. They lived through the days of people actually being out picking cotton. Because I wasn't there. I wasn't even thought in my parents' mind at the time, right? So, and speaking to him, my father looked at the television and they showed clips of people actually picking cotton, and he went and broke down the whole concept of picking cotton, how your fingers,
Process, right.
Yeah.
your fingers get
All
blistered
raw
and
right.
holes in your hands from picking, and you're out there, you work 12-hour days
In the sun.
in the
Right.
sun, and you don't have a car, so there's a wagon that comes by your
Absolutely.
house and
Right.
takes you, and this is where we're from, right?
Yeah.
We're from these people who raised us and want us to actually do better. And you hear this. You hear someone say, well, no one ever wants you to be any better than them except your parents,
Absolutely.
right? So or someone like your aunt or whoever, right, in your life. So and and we should salute them always. You know, people sometimes just tend to forget that, you know, they
paved the way.
you complain all the time. You're like, oh, you know, I got to get up to go to work. I got to do this. I got to do that. You know, knock it off. You know what I mean? Because
That's a freedom.
Right. That's a freedom.
Right, you've been afforded
and you
this
should
freedom.
be, and you should be happy that you have a job. You should be happy that
Agreed.
you're working. You should be happy. I mean, you shouldn't stay in contentment, right?
No.
But you should be happy that you're actually able to make the kind of income you need to make.
I agree. I mean, unfortunately, though, a lot of people don't exist in a place of gratitude at all,
Right.
right? Which is why we are surrounded by fear and racism and all of these other afflictions. I did want to
agree.
ask you a quick question because it's important to me that you talked about these programs that you participated in. Because I think it's unfortunate that even our inner city youth are not encouraged to go for these programs. Can you tell me how you learned about them, which is what compelled you to start and on your way to college?
And the reality is those programs are gradually being eliminated.
They are.
Yes, they are.
But they're
Yeah.
still there and they're
Some of
being
them are still there,
underutilized.
right.
And that's why they're saying, well,
So I think you
they're
have to
not
work
being
through your
used.
guidance counselor, right?
Yeah.
And they have to expose you to some of those. And I wasn't exposed because they essentially told me that I wasn't college material. So
Wow.
I
Oh, wow.
found out because someone else that I knew in the family who was
Told
in
you
the program.
about it. Right. You see that?
That's very interesting. People do, you're coughing too. I mean, I got allergies, so if I start coughing this season, don't look at me like, oh,
Right.
see, money's on crack. Don't do that.
Crack.
So you,
Still
so
do
you,
crack?
no,
I know, right?
no, but people, that's a whole other show.
Right.
So school. So how did school how did school work for you? Like, was it a good experience? I know sometimes when people say they went away to college, they didn't necessarily enjoy the experience, because I remember me going away to school. The experience was weird to me.
Right.
Because you make fun of the fact that I'm from Long Island, which is okay, you know. But my neighborhood growing up was 90% black, you know, 8% Hispanic, 2% white. So when I went away to school, you know, my first experience was walking into a lecture hall, and everybody there was white.
Right.
You know,
Culture shock.
and then, you know, me, you know, I look like the dot on the end of a sentence.
For sure.
You know,
Absolutely.
you know, so
They could follow you anywhere
right,
you go.
so to that, speak to me a little about your experience in school. And,
Oh, no, absolutely. I
yeah.
grew up in a predominantly black community.
Right,
and
right.
Public housing projects here in Manhattan. And then when I went to Hofstra, it was a predominantly Caucasian university.
right.
In fact, my roommates, I had a triple, and two of my roommates were white.
Right.
So my experience was really just grinding it out because I had to make up for the lack of a quality education I received in the past. So most of
Exactly.
my time was just spent studying, right? They would come back at 1 o'clock and still see me at the desk studying. But I kind of grind through that, did extremely well. It paid off. Hard work does pay off.
Right.
So I did that, and from that I was made offers from several. It was big 8 accounting firms then. Now it's the big 4 accounting firms. But I declined that.
Right.
Because the recruiter, African-American recruiter, said, Bruce, what do you want to do, go to law school? I said, yes. She said, don't take this offer.
Okay.
And you can only imagine working for one of the top, largest accounting firms in the world, turning that down.
Right.
Because that would have served me and my family well.
Of course.
Sure.
Right. that must have
But
been tough for you.
It was
That
a
must-
tough decision,
yeah, it
but
must have been.
I declined it, and then I went to Georgetown Law School.
Right. Wow. And you know, I think I spoke to you before in regards to Georgetown. My daughter, salute to my daughter, by the way. So she was trying to apply, and I learned a lot about the application process, getting into the school there, and it's. And you'd have a better chance, as a black man, I'd have a better chance of passing for a white person than trying to actually get into Georgetown. It's like so difficult to get into that school. So you getting into Georgetown Law is amazing in itself.
But I want to say there's privileged application for those who are not black, right? A lot of these schools have special seats set aside,
Right.
just in case
But those seats are
certain
limited.
people
Those
call
seats
and get
are-
their students in.
Those seats are
It's
limited.
limited to,
Right.
to
Right.
people who are of influence.
No question, no question. So let's talk a little about your book. So your book, Never Far From Home. Please go pick this up. Where can they?
Anyway, Barnes and Nobles, Amazon.
Amazing book. And I wanted to ask you this question. You had mentioned something in your book where you were accused of robbery,
Right.
right? And you saw your friend was murdered, right? Talk a little about that part of the book, because I thought that had to be a very tough situation for you. I mean, and most of us go through things like that, but that it gripped me when I was reading it, because I personally had something that happened to me similar, you know. And when you're in the eyes of law enforcement, and they think you're guilty, you know, there's nothing really that can turn them away, because they're looking to get that, you know, get you in prison or in jail, or looking to fill their quota, do whatever. So talk to me a little about that. I mean, those conditions were tough.
Yeah,
right?
I've been in the system a few times, even twice as a Microsoft attorney, spending a night in jail.
Oh, okay.
But the time you're talking about is when I was 10 years old. We moved from Brooklyn to Manhattan. My mother taught us immediately how to transfer back to Brooklyn to see our family.
Right.
And so I must have made this trip a dozen times on my own. And this one particular time, I took the train to Brooklyn, got on the platform to take a local train, and then a white officer and a white gentleman said, "There he is." And what do you do?
Out of nowhere.
Out of nowhere. And what do you do? And I have the opportunity while I tell this same story to judges around the world, predominantly Caucasian judges.
That's right.
So they could get a picture, a proximity of what it's like being black in America.
That's right.
Right.
So very different experience.
Absolutely,
than
totally
theirs.
different. And they have stereotypes, right? So
Yes.
what I did, I ran, and the only way to run was to jump on the track. So I jumped on the track. The train was stationary at the
my
time. Step over the third rail, then there's a ledge. You walk from one station to the other.
Right,
So
I got
ran.
it. Right.
And by the time I got to the other station, four cops
Were there. Yeah, 'cause they
And
know where you were
said-
going anyway.
They knew where I was going. They
Right,
said,
right.
"You're under arrest."
Wow.
And they took me to the precinct, 72nd precinct.
Oh,
in
72nd.
Brooklyn.
Yeah, no. Okay.
And they handcuffed me to one. It was a long time ago, so it was one of those old wooden chairs. And they said, "Listen, just say you did it." And I said, "What? That you robbed somebody?" I said, "I didn't rob anyone." They said, "Say you did it, and you get to go home."
Unbelievable.
And I was crying, of course. I didn't say it. Had I did, I wouldn't be here today.
Right.
But after about 3 hours, they finally called my parents, my mother really, not my father. They picked me up and they took me to my grandmother's house. And my mother called repeatedly for a 2-week period. And finally, they said, "We caught the person." So there was never an apology.
Right.
Right?
And you were a minor.
I was 10 years old.
I mean, they shouldn't have even been talking to you without
They
your
should not
parent.
have.
Right.
But see, people say, "Why did you tell that story?" I think it's important. One, it still happens today.
Yes.
And two, people think when you're African American and you run, you're guilty. And you're
Right.
not always guilty. You're scared.
Scared.
sometimes,
Right, of course.
And especially of the police, right?
Right. And sometimes you say that you did something, you didn't do it because you want to go home, right?
Right.
If you have all your paperwork in order, as a citizen, you're driving your car. Say, for instance, you're in a car, and you get pulled over by the police. Off the bat, you gain some sort of anxiety,
Yes.
and you become nervous.
Yes.
Because you never know at that point if anything is going to transpire that's going to have you wind up behind bars.
That's right.
Right.
And that's only as a person of color, though.
Right.
Like white people
Yep.
don't have that
They
experience.
don't have that anxiety.
feel
You know,
that.
and it's, I mean,
have
They're like,
privilege.
oh,
They have
another
privilege.
fucking officer.
you know, right. They wouldn't know
You're
nothing
absolutely right.
about that because their officers are their friends. That's
Mm-hmm.
why. Oh, I know Carl. How you doing there, Jim? How's your mother?
Right.
How's she been? I haven't talked to her in quite some time. Black people don't have that same synergy with the police.
Sure.
You know, they say, quote unquote, the police is supposed to be your friend. You know, but that's not always the case.
Right.
You know, so you were 10 years old and you didn't not have
baby.
representation, and you were handcuffed and you were detained.
Absolutely.
Right. So that right there is just
It's sickening.
Wrong
I'm
for so many
imagining my
reasons.
11-year-old son now,
Right.
right? Like
Right.
in this predicament, and it's just like
And if you
insane
admit to
me.
that, you would be on
You
a
would be
different
done.
life path.
right.
sure.
Right.
So fortunately, I didn't admit to it, and I'm here today with you all.
Right. So you moved forward with your life.
You've been a thinking man.
Right, no question.
He was like, no, this doesn't sound right.
and eventually, it led you to the culture that I am so familiar with, the entertainment culture, right? And how'd you get started because you worked in entertainment and you actually worked with several hip hop artists too, right?
Yeah.
Just to put it out there, he's part of the culture people recognize. Okay, so talk to me a little about how you got started, who you represented, and how did that transpire?
I got started because one, I was a tax attorney first.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Well,
And then-
that's a good reason.
And
Is
then
that
I
fun
made
for you, or
yeah, it was good. I was
Yeah.
doing that in DC. Then I got the opportunity to intern with a major entertainment attorney, Kendall Mentor.
Oh, Kendall. Okay, that's right.
And so Kendall wasn't paying me that well. Kendall was paying me maybe $6,000 a year. So the first thing I had to do, I called my mother up and said, I'm coming back and living with you in the project.
Right.
And she said, if that's what you want to do, certainly. And then just building clients. My first major client was Pete Rock CL Smoke.
Okay.
Right.
Nice.
When I went to go visit Pete in Mount Vernon, which is
So
where he
this
lived at the time.
is the height of their
Oh,
career?
this is the height. This is the height of their career.
In the
They
90s,
were
right.
Untouchables at that point.
Right, with
And
Eddie
their
F,
first- Eddie F.
Heavy D, and
Absolutely.
Okay.
Their first
Rest in
record
peace.
was out.
Right. Okay.
So they was at the top of their career. And Pete at that point was one of the top producers. Pete Rock, Dr.
of
Dre,
course.
tore
Of
us
course.
up.
Right.
So I went to his house to meet with his family, and his family was like, Bruce, listen, essentially, and this is why I respect him and his family so much. They said, listen, we're not going to, everyone wants to represent Pete right now, even people who don't live in our community. They're coming up, want to represent him. But we didn't raise our kid till he's 18 years old and pass him on to someone who doesn't look like him.
That's right.
Oh wow.
And you don't get that from people. And they said, if you're up for the task, you can represent him.
Right.
So I respect him for me being where I am today, right?
Right.
I give him and his family a lot of credit for that. And from Pete, it makes it easy to get everyone else because everyone wanted to be associated with Pete at that point, right? So it was great. So we had a lot of folks from Heavy D, had LL, Buster, Little Kim. We had a lot of folks.
Yeah, I remember Pete Rock at that particular time, and him and CL were very big. They were synonymous with my television show with Ed Lover and Dr. Dre because we used
Absolutely.
we used their music as part of our packages when we promote the show and stuff like that. So, and I told CL that as well. Like his song "Reminisce" is part of it's like a staple for the show.
It's an incredible song.
Yeah,
It
no
is.
question, no
Staple
question.
For hip hop,
Absolutely.
right? Period.
No question
Yeah.
about it.
So did you manage these artists, or did you work on their taxes, or did you?
No, I was just their entertainment attorney.
You was their entertainment
So I
attorney.
worked on all their entertainment deal, their record deal, production deal, publishing deal.
Right,
That's why
right,
we still see these artists today, right?
Right, absolutely.
yeah. Which is
How many bad deals have been done and they didn't have an entertainment lawyer?
Many.
Yeah.
So with that being said, so you enjoyed that. I'm quite sure you did a great job, but you transitioned from that to eventually working for Microsoft,
Right.
right? So tell me about that journey.
Well, I think I tell people all the time they got to be strategic with their career. So what I saw, if you know the music industry in the 90s, the companies would give you, say, $500,000 and say, make a record.
Of
And
course.
what they're really searching for is just one single.
Right.
Because that one single would drive the record.
Correct.
Right?
Right.
And so when Napster came about,
Oh yeah.
it changed the landscape.
Right.
Sure
right.
did.
Because that one record, people would not buy albums anymore. They would just download that
it.
one record.
That's right.
And so at that point, strategically, I said it's time for me to actually go work for a technology company.
Smart.
And I did with Microsoft. Microsoft was looking for someone to help them with the music industry. And one of the people I called several people. Clarence Avant was one. And he was like,
salute to
Bruce.
Clarence Avant,
He's like,
man.
Bruce, go over there and get that damn
Salute
stock.
to the Godfather, man. God bless him.
Yeah, so he said, go get the stock.
Right.
So I did it. And so I went out to Microsoft. And what I did was worked on the team that built the Windows Media Player.
Right.
That you all pretty much
Okay.
use today.
Oh,
because
wow.
at that point, all you had was the real player.
Yeah.
So you would be on the Windows platform. If you want to listen to content, you have to download the real player. to
Right.
play it.
Right.
Right.
So by building the Windows Media Player, it was a more seamless experience.
Right.
So that was exciting. But after about 2 years, I wanted to get out of Seattle because I moved.
Right.
Because it wasn't very black at that point at Microsoft or Seattle. So
Right.
I said it's time
So
to
how,
get
so
back.
talk to me about that, because I know that. I mean, school wasn't very black either.
No,
right?
not at all.
So you were probably used to that kind of dynamic at that point, right? Or were you,
Well,
do you ever?
school-
Listen, do you ever get used to that dynamic?
Well, I'm
Does that
kind
ever
of
happen?
used to it. If
Right.
I'm in Hofstra, I can come to the city.
Right, right,
And if I'm in Georgetown, it's in D.C.
Yeah. Right,
So I could find
Close
people
enough.
of color.
right, right.
But in Seattle,
It's a whole
it
different
was a
Oh,
whole
ballgame.
nothing.
different ball.
Right. Wow, that must have been tough for you. But
Yeah.
so you made it work though, right?
Well, I told him what happened was essentially I give the vice chairman credit. I said, I'm leaving after 2 years. And he said, why? I said, there's no black people here. And he said, let's see if we can get you back to New York. And let's see if we can change things, at least at Microsoft.
Right.
There we go.
So
Let's
I played a
diversify.
role to make sure my teams were diverse, make sure we hired diverse people. So I just took him at his word and really just capitalized on that for the benefit of the company.
Right.
And that's tremendous because I think that's a trending thing now, right? Like, let's have a team of diversity and,
Right.
diversification. We have corporations talking about that. But back then, corporations weren't looking
They
to
weren't.
do that.
They weren't
And they
doing
weren't looking to take Black employees and have them help them do that,
Right.
So,
No, it's totally different at that point. We're talking about 2000.
right.
And that's really, in retrospect, that's still not that long ago. It's
No.
only 24 years ago.
Exactly.
You know, and not only weren't they trying to be diverse, they weren't really interested in the power of women at all either. You know,
absolutely.
24 years ago, it was not.
Oh, I know.
You know,
I worked
everything
in
was still kind of
corporate
barbaric
world.
at that time.
Oh,
You know,
yeah.
so
Fun times.
you know, and it's very hard for people of color even today. But back then, it was just
Yeah.
very difficult. That's why.
You're absolutely right.
Stories
That's why
so
your
important.
your rise to success is amazing to say the least. You know, and due to the fact that you are fully equipped to answer the next question, I want to ask you. So, what do you think? This is a hip hop show, okay? And I want to get your opinion on what you think the state of the music is today. You know, you're a child of the hip hop culture, and I'm proud of that actually. You know, because of what you've achieved, and you're a black man who have achieved such great things. But talk to me a little about where you think the music is going. You know, and are you happy
Deep
with its
sigh.
progress?
It's a deep side. I think when people ask me that all the time.
I mean, but no, I asked
It's
you
a
that
heavy
because you're
question.
fully qualified to answer,
Right.
and from your perspective
Right.
is what's the most interesting part of that. So,
from my perspective, just hip hop, R&B,
Mm.
the '90s were.
oh yeah, of course,
Music's
Yeah.
of
much
course,
different now.
right.
Even lyrically,
Yes.
is different. The type of music that
I
we
say
from
all
a
the
rap
time,
standpoint too.
R&B is like hip hop now, right? It's like soft.
But you know, but if you look at R&B, you know, like if you like, this is another thing. I'm going back to my parents. If you speak to my mother, like Jodeci is not the Temptations. If you
Right.
speak
No,
to my
they're not.
mother,
well,
Mary
that's
J.
always,
Blige
that's
is
always
not
going to
Mary
happen
Wells, right?
generationally.
Right.
Right. So the change is inevitable. You know what I mean?
Yes, for sure.
So you don't know whether to consider it a growth based on who you're speaking to or just a change, right?
Right.
So this is why I'm asking Bruce.
But even lyrically, I think
Right.
rap music has totally changed. Right?
Yes.
The
Of
type
course.
lyrics.
Right. But my point to you was R&B, the lyrics changed too because they sung about how men in R&B at that time sung about how much they love their women.
Right.
You know, how much they cherish their women, right? Now, in the 90s, when, you know, it started, it became more about lust in
That's
the
what it was,
songs,
Right.
right?
But,
Absolutely.
but
Even
we still
rap,
had a
too.
lot of
Right, right.
elements of love, like real love music in the 90s. We
Right.
definitely
We did.
Well,
We
right,
did.
right. So
Yeah.
but this is why I'm asking Bruce about the hip hop part of it. You know, I just his perspective is important to me. You know, I just need to know what you think. I mean, because you come from a totally different thing. It's not like you're not a rapper, you're not a DJ, you're not, you know, you're not a graffiti artist. You didn't make clothes. So you're coming from a corporate perspective to a degree. So I'm just trying to get an idea of what you think about the music, and you've been so close to it because you've represented it. So
Right. I think she's right. I think in terms of rap, I think in the '90s, you're right. It was lust and all that. Now we're talking about lyrically killing, and in the '90s, really all about in the '80s, all about our experience.
right.
Right.
Now it's like I'm not sure if they're talking about experience based on the lyrics.
Right,
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 right.
Talking now, right?
A lot
I
of
think
times
it's
they're
totally
just
different.
talking. It's not based on
It's not their
experience.
lifestyle.
It's not, right.
Right. It's kind of it's weird, but sometimes it
So
happens.
most people who I know, rappers, producers, they'll say it's totally different the type of music that's being played. In fact, they would go as far as to say it's not good music.
Right.
Well, so many people will say that, you know, but if you ask a 24-year-old,
They'll
that's the
say
same
it's good.
question.
They'll
It's
say it's
great.
good. Yeah.
Well,
You know?
it depends on which 24-year-old. If you ask 24-year-old in my house, they have a different perspective. I think also because the elements of hip hop have been like so far removed, right? If we can't pay homage like Ice Spice, Nicki Minaj, if there's not a recognition that you took your whole facade from Little Kim,
Right.
You can't pay homage to those who came before you because you don't know about them. You haven't been taught.
So, Kiana, let me ask you a question. So, whose fault is that? Is it their fault? They're 20 years old. They're 21 years old. They're 22. They don't really. At the end of the day, it's as hip hop is professionals, people who live the culture, who've been part of the culture. You know, like myself, I can consider myself part of the blame too. You have to be teachers.
You have to.
Right.
You do.
But,
You know, if
but
you're
the
historians
parents
of-
are the teachers,
Well,
right?
the parents don't necessarily
Allegedly.
know what to teach them. They don't necessarily make it a priority to teach their children.
But that's where the problem
Right,
lies.
right,
We can't
right.
we can't even blame the artists that are making music that is, promoting gangs or whatever, because if the kids have a direct outlet to that,
Right.
and that's what they're influenced by, can you really blame the artist at that point?
No, you
Or
can't.
do
not
you
at
go
all.
back to blaming the parent because
No.
what
It's the
has been
parent.
instilled in them,
Absolutely.
where they can hear that and say that's not right? You know what I mean? There's
Right.
no separation. They can't dissect
it's-
it.
Yeah, there's so many
Definitely
questions in
acquiring.
regards to that. There's cultural differences. There's
Sure.
differences in music. What kind of parents do you have? If you have both parents in the house, it's,
Right.
it's a dichotomy of different issues
Sure.
that lead up to the end of that. Coming to the correct answer. It's very difficult, but it's not always.
Yeah, I don't even think there is a correct
And it's not
answer,
even a
right?
blanket answer to that.
It's not.
Right,
yeah.
there is.
But at the end of the day, you can always listen to the lyrics or not of someone's song and know whether or not it's lyrical, it's entertaining,
And does it relate to you? That's how I
if it's
feel.
relatable,
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
So that's really what's most important.
And the company's going to continue to put it out, right?
They
as long as
are.
it's making money.
well,
Correct.
yeah, of course. I mean, they don't care as long as you fit the suit, right?
Right.
Absolutely. And if a couple more 100 black young kids get killed, then so be it. It
Yeah, well,
doesn't matter.
I don't know if they're that. Well,
They'll say it's not their
right.
responsibility.
Well,
Right.
they'll say that, but at the end of the
course.
day,
It's like
it is.
freedom of speech.
Right.
Sure.
They hide behind that, but but we dealt with that in the '90s too. I mean, if you talk about NWA, you talk about
Absolutely.
Two Live Crew, you talk about Ice-T, you talk about all these people that used the freedom of speech as their battle cry. Right.
The so-called era of gangster rap, if
Right.
you will.
When that was, and you can even take it back to Public Enemy. Public Enemy were literally hanging during that show. They were literally hanging Ku Klux Klan member dummies
Right. They
in
were.
their show.
Absolutely.
Right.
To create, to actually create a energy to let people know what their point, trying to get their point across, right?
Right.
So, you never really know. So I mean, it is what it is, right? So
It is.
but but Bruce, so talk to me. So all right, so you have your book. Your book is phenomenal. I mean, you were raised by, and what's so funny? Someone said to me, you were raised by women primarily.
Pretty
Your
much,
father
yeah.
was not around, but and there's something to be said, and maybe I might be wrong in stating this, but as it relates to men, and it's in like a man himself, right? There are different types of men,
Right.
right? If a man who was raised by women, a tribe of women, or a man who was raised by another man, they grow up to be different types of men. Now, I'm not saying that each man is good or bad, or I'm not putting that energy into it, but they have a different vibe as it relates to women or accomplishments or how they deal with their life, and a lot of times men who are raised by women are very successful. I don't know where that comes from. Maybe it's because women
It comes from
work
our
so
nurturing and our love.
Right.
That's what it comes from.
Right.
It was certainly a lot of love when
Right,
you're
right.
raised by women. There's no
Yes.
question about it.
Right. So speak to me about the dichotomy of that at home and how that worked for you. And it must have been great because I mean sometimes you don't even know what is happening when you're young. You don't really understand. Like okay, your pop was not around, but you had love apparently. Right?
Oh, no, I had a lot of love. I
Right,
think
right.
my grandmother, I lived with her. In fact, I lived in the projects here in Manhattan, but
Right.
at some point I left.
Oh yeah,
And I said,
you mentioned
I was
that.
getting
Right.
into some trouble here. And I said, let me leave.
Right.
And she said, you can come stay with me. So I stayed with her in Crown Heights and Kingsborough Project.
Well, okay.
So, and then when things got a little sticky there, I went to Brownsville Projects to stay with my aunt.
Wow.
So it was like a village, right?
Yeah.
It's like, okay, let's keep them straight and a narrow path. So no, women have always been a part of my life. That's why I had that discussion with my aunt. I was afraid, but I didn't want to disappoint her, my mother, or
Right.
my grandmother, right?
Yeah.
So no, it's they played a significant role in my life.
Yeah, and it drove you to be successful because you didn't want to disappoint them.
Yep.
You understand?
I was ready to quit on myself, but not
Oh,
them.
not
Never on
them.
them.
Right? See, you know, and salute to them, man. Glory to God. Salute to them, and anybody else that's like them that is going through the same thing. So I appreciate them because it's tough. It's tough out here, man. Nobody's giving you anything out here.
Not at all.
You know. I tell my daughter, I said, listen, you think this person cares? They don't care. They're not gonna just give you anything. You got to go take it.
Absolutely.
You know?
Absolutely.
You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
She's aspiring to be a lawyer. You know, I would like for you to talk to her at some point. You know,
That's what I'm here for. There's no question.
no
about
question. And she's very smart, straight A student. You know, and I'm very proud of her. But I tell her, you got to be tough in life. Life is not for soft people. Trust me.
That's right.
So looking back on your career, right? I know you did your book. You worked in entertainment. You ventured to Microsoft, and you're very successful there. What other business opportunities working at Microsoft have you been able to take advantage of since you've been there?
I think what I'm proud of is really, first of all, I was able to close $1 billion deals. I can do that
Right.
without an issue. Right?
Okay.
But if you say, what
Hey
am I
D,
most-
he closed $1 billion deal, so we got to we need a little money, so maybe we can talk to him after the show.
Nah, well,
You gonna write a check, real couple of checks. I'm only kidding.
No, so I think what's most important to me, and I always tease my colleague, I say, well, when I leave Microsoft, because there'll come a point where I'm going to retire,
Right.
I said, I'll sit on a bench, Central Park bench, I'm clear about that.
Right.
And I said, when I reflect upon what's most important, closing the big deals were important because they help drive revenue for
Right.
Microsoft.
Right.
But what's probably most important to me is when I supported a $20 billion team, my team was extremely diverse,
Right.
extremely diverse.
Yep.
And that was kind of intentional so people internally at Microsoft can see it, but as well as people outside of Microsoft can see that you can have a diverse team supporting a $20 billion business, which is larger than most Fortune 500 companies. So that's what's most important to me, my diversity efforts and the tools that Microsoft has to help kids reach their potential. I leverage that, right? We
Right.
have TILS, which is computer science in high school, where we start teaching people in urban areas computer science.
Yes.
Right.
So
You need that,
those sort
right.
of things and other skilling projects.
And we need it.
And also trying to bring broadband to urban America, right? Because we have an issue. When it comes down to broadband, I think you pointed out early, do you pay for broadband or do you pay to eat?
No question.
Right?
That's
And
right.
I think that broadband should be free
Yeah.
because what it does is further the gaps between those who have and those who don't have.
True.
Because you need broadband to one,
To do anything.
healthcare,
Yeah.
telehealth. You need
Yeah.
broadband to search for a job on the internet.
Yep.
Training is on the internet. School, we learned school.
Everything. Yep.
So if you don't get it to the urban and rural communities of America, you're going to put those groups further behind. So those are the type of things that I'm involved
And do you think
from
it's
a social standpoint.
do you think I already know the answer to this from my perspective, but do you think it's designed for us to continuously be behind?
Well, I think a lot of people don't like to talk about that, but I think the system. My book is written to inspire people to break out despite this situation.
Right.
Right. Because the system is not designed for us
For
to
you
break
to
out.
grow.
Of course.
That's
I can
right.
go back to
Right.
the projects I grew up in, Brownsville projects, and you still see the same people. Very few
That's
make it
the
out.
same.
Right.
That's right.
So you have to ask yourself, why is that? You go to rural America, and they have the same story.
Right.
They don't get out.
Right.
So the system, as currently constructed, is not designed for those to really break out.
Right,
So-
because they're not even presenting the same opportunities.
you need the
When you
resources.
think about having less, education, less medical care, everything is putting you under where you need to be. So we're constantly trying to play catch up as a people. So these things, implementing technology for our kids to learn. Data is the next wave of the world.
Yep.
These are things that young urban kids need to be involved in, and even graphic arts, right? Allowing them the ability to have access to things will keep them out the streets, like you said.
Right, absolutely.
You were busy, you were focused, you stayed out the streets. You stay out the streets, you stay out of trouble, and you learn, and now you can start paving your path towards success.
I watched something the other day which was really it was funny, but it wasn't funny because Mike Tyson said it. So salute to him. But he was saying that as a country we're really stupid. we're just like, I mean, that's maybe I should say we're ignorant, because you can't say stupid, because stupid means you're doing something knowing better and you're doing it anyway. That's just being stupid. But ignorant, that we're ignorant,
Right.
as it relates to a lot of things, and the rest of the world is running past us like, you know, like Carl Lewis, right? And if I'm thinking that way, because if that is indeed the case, and we're so far behind as a nation, that puts people of color even further behind.
Absolutely.
Right? Which
Yes.
is scary, right? Like, you know, so that's why I asked this question. Like, are we like systematically being held back?
Well, I
You
just
know?
said it. I
Yeah,
said
yeah,
that
yeah.
the system
That's right.
is not designed.
Right,
Right.
it's not
So you
at
got to
all.
come up with policies to put policy in places
Right.
Yes.
where there's programs, real programs, so the educational system is adequately funded
Right.
in these urban and rural places. You have to do that.
Right.
Right.
And until that happens, you're not going to really see people break out.
Right.
So that's why I think it's important for people like myself who did break out, who wasn't supposed to break out.
Right.
I wasn't supposed to be here by any standards.
Sure.
But people have broke out. Some of us, not a lot, but there's enough.
Right.
That's why it's important for us to go back just to inspire people to break out despite this situation and despite the lack of resources. Right.
Yeah, right.
Until the system, and we have to constantly work on the system as well.
Right.
Right? So the system will change. But we can't
Right.
wait for the system to change.
We can't.
Because then we'll lose another generation of great people.
Right, because that system has been in place
It's
for
gonna
so
take some
long
time.
and designed specifically for us to fail that you kind of have to work around that, right? Just be clever.
And in your book, it says you almost quit, right? You almost, yeah. So, but you didn't, and thank you, and salute to you for not doing that. You know, so, thank you for being here today. I appreciate
Thank
you,
you
brother.
for having me.
Yeah, no question, man. This was entertaining. I
It was.
appreciate it, man.
Very
Thank
much.
you very
You
much.
needed part 2 with him as well.
No question. That
You
would
did
be
a
great.
fantastic job.
Thank
So
you.
hopefully I'm not getting into anything. But it's great.
It's all good. Yo, listen, man. This is the T Money Podcast joint. Thank you so much for watching today. Kiana, the Purple Goddess, and Bruce Jackson in the building, man. Thank you so much, man. Thank you guys for being here, man. All right. Salute
Thank
to
you.
you. All right.
Thank you.
Applaud, man. We out of here, man. Peace, 2 fingers.
T Money Podcast joint.